Guten Tag, Piraten Partei. My name is Suzie Dawson. I'm the leader of the Internet Party of New Zealand. I am extremely honoured that I've been asked to speak to you guys today. And I am so pleased to be a part of your conference. So I've been sitting here and thinking to myself after I heard from Jens that he would like me to speak. What is it that I would say to 245 pirates from Germany? And I thought that a random quote from the internet would be a pretty good start. And today I came across this one. It said, if you don't fit in, there is a pretty good chance that there is something great about you. And I thought, what a brilliant quote to describe the pirates and also the internet party, because we are seen as the outsiders and there is something different about us. There's something very unique about us. And that is what attracts people to us, is that difference. The things that differentiate us from the status quo, from the options that are already available to us, from the societal norms. So then I was thinking to myself, what does it mean to be a pirate? And a pirate has the courage to venture. It has the courage to venture into the unknown, into uncharted territory, so to speak. The courage to travel beyond the confines of the traditional jurisdiction into extrajudicial territory, a sense of adventurism, and the willingness to embrace the risk factors of traveling into the unknown, of forging a new path. So then I thought, what stops people doing this? What limits their ability to embrace that path? What prevents them having that courage? And I realized, of course, there is fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of taking risks. There is social pressure. And social pressure is something that I see us struggling with on both sides of the political divides at the moment. And that comes down to conformity. We are educated and raised to believe that we must conform. But if we conform to the current status quo, it can literally mean oblivion for humankind. So it's going to take people like us who don't conform and who have the courage to do things differently to change that path that humanity is currently headed down. Really, that adventurism and that willingness to be a pirate, in my opinion, represent our only hope. Social pressure is where we allow other people to define our reality. This can be what we don't like, what we collectively don't like. It can also mean where we allow others to tell us what we do like and what we do want. In my research and my journalism, I have often come against the conflict of what we are supposed to believe, what we are told to believe, what is the established truth, versus what through effort and analysis and digging for the facts, digging for the details that paint the real picture. And often the real picture is not what we're told by our social group. It's not what we see on the news. It's not what we're taught to believe, but it is in fact the truth. And courage to face that truth is the first step in designing a future that reflects it, a future that we make and mold for ourselves, rather than one that is delivered to us by other people. Leading the Internet Party this year, I have learned a number of very useful and valuable lessons that I would like to pass on to you. So the first thing is that we had to, this year, our goals for the party were not to win the election, to get into power, to become a member of parliament. Those are the goals that other people would expect of us. But our party had taken such a battering in 2014 it had been attacked so voraciously by the power structure, both in New Zealand and internationally, that our goals were much more simple than trying to get into power in New Zealand. Our goals were merely to rebuild a party that can be sustainable for the long term, that can still exist in the next election in 2020, in the next election in 2023, following that in 2026. We have decided that merely campaigning for a single election cycle as the sole purpose for existence of a party is inherently insufficient. That actually our duty to our supporters and to ourselves is to build a platform that will stand the test of time, that will serve for generations, not to define our success or our failure by the outcome of a single election. So this year I learned that we cannot expect the systems of control to allow us to triumph through their own channels and their own methods. And wherever possible, we must seize the opportunity to subvert their channels and methods to tell the truth and to get the message through to the public that we so often are prevented from doing so. So at the beginning of the election campaign this year, I was provided with an opportunity to speak on Radio New Zealand. I was interviewed by the biggest radio station in our country. And before I did that interview, I was offered to either do it live, which I do prefer, and I'm sorry I'm not with you live today, that would have been my preference, or to do a pre-record with them, which I then knew that they would edit and that they would censor. So firstly, I insisted on doing it live because I did not trust the mainstream media not to edit my words or to distort my messages. And then secondly, I knew that if I got on and I did a very, very mainstream message and I kept within the confines of what's socially acceptable for the general public to hear, that perhaps they would have me on again. Perhaps they would use me as a commentator going forward. Perhaps I would be able to raise my profile and the party's profile by that method, but then I would forever be stuck within those goalposts of what is acceptable to the mainstream. On the other hand, I also knew that if I got on there and I spoke truth to power, and I spoke it so voraciously that it could not be ignored, and I backed it up with evidence, that even though they would never have me on again, that I would inevitably be blacked out by them, that single opportunity to get through to the largest listening audience in New Zealand could be enough to convey messages that had been withheld from them, and that could wake up, that could have a ripple effect, that it would be, that single interview would be sufficient to wake up a number of people. Whether or not they voted for us, the fact that they would have access to that information was a bigger victory. So that's what I chose to do. So I got onto Radio New Zealand's Sunday program, and when they asked me about the Internet Party, and particularly about Russia, where I now live in exile in Russia, I brought up the March 2017 WikiLeaks cables that proved, and not only proved beyond any shadow of a doubt, I'm talking about actual dispatch orders from the CIA here, it proved that New Zealand spies were receiving their orders from a foreign country to travel to France and to meddle in the electoral process in France, to infiltrate the political parties in the presidential election, and to report back to their American masters through the Five Eyes spying system. Now, those dispatch orders are a level of evidence beyond anything that we've seen in accusations against Russia or any other country. They were proof of the culpability of the New Zealand government in meddling in the democratic outcomes of other countries. And that, in the wake of that interview, I received dozens of emails from New Zealanders absolutely lauding the fact that I had spoken that truth to power, that I had got that message through the airwaves. So for me, Internet Party this year has not just been about votes. It's not just been about the electoral cycle. It has been about seizing opportunities to put a glitch in the matrix of mainstream narratives, mainstream media, to subvert their channels wherever possible while creating and building our own channels. So the other thing that I've learned is that we cannot sit around and wait for the system to reform itself. It simply won't. The purpose for our existence is to empower people to create that change. So the anti-spy bill series of events that we've been holding for the past several months, where we've decided, rather than fight directly in Parliament for reform against surveillance law, maybe we need to start writing the reform legislation ourselves. Maybe we need to create the future that we want and then to lobby for it. And that series of events has been remarkable in terms of raising awareness internationally as to the lengths that the state has gone to in New Zealand to surveil its own citizens. I learned this year not to mirror the priorities of the system, but to set our own priorities and our own benchmarks for success. We can't allow others to define our motivations or our successes. And this is something that is particularly the media tries to do all of the time. So the media will say, Internet Party only got X amount of votes and therefore it's a failure. But to us, we have been a success at every turn. We are achieving exactly what we wanted to achieve, to build a platform with longevity, to rebuild our community, and to stick our heads up on the international stage and say, things have to change. And whether or not the existing power structure allows us to have a voice for change in Parliament, we will have a voice for change on the international stage. And we will have it 52 weeks a year, 365 days. We will not have it for 3 months every 3 years during an election cycle. But we will fight these issues every single week relentlessly, regardless of whether the mainstream media platforms us, regardless of whether the system says that we're a success or a failure. We will prove our success by existing, by continuing to exist, and by continuing to work and continuing to build, regardless of how the mainstream would like to define us. Survival in a system that is designed to kill us, literally designed to kill us, is the ultimate act of resistance. The pirates must never be defined by how many votes they got in one election. You are defined by the fact that you are all sitting here today together, still willing to fight, still willing to change. You have survived. You are survivors. And you are still committed. And as long as you have that fire burning inside your heart, it does not actually matter what it is that the media have to say about you or what it is that the electoral results said about you. You can fight and have a voice and make change regardless of whether you have a foot in the door of the established system. You can act to alter that system outside of merely the electoral process. Loyalty is also an act of resistance. So the state and the mechanisms of the state are geared to fracture you. Their entire purpose is to break you apart. So the more that you become close to each other, the more that you have each other's back, the more I've written in my notes, solidarity is life. the more solidarity that you have with each other, the more loyalty you have to yourselves and each other and to your party, the harder it will be for the state to take you down, and you will continue to survive, and inevitably you will flourish. So make survival, solidarity, and loyalty your motivations. Make having a voice 52 weeks a year your motivation. Make building outside of the system your definition of success. Never allow the established system to define your success or your failure. Together we are capable of things that we are not capable of alone. Another lesson this year for me, because I was very much a lone wolf in many aspects, specifically my journalism, for years. Not in my activism, where I've always had an amazing crew of people working with me. But I have learned this year the power of community, even more so than in prior years. So embrace that community, understand that together our efforts are exponential. What two of us can do together is more than what each of us can do separately. And take a really long look in the mirror. When you're being criticized, or when other governments are being criticized, other societies and cultures are being criticized, take a really long look in the mirror and ask yourself, what is our society, what is our government really complicit in? Because one of the things that we've discovered in New Zealand is that this very firm sense of national identity that we've always had, believing we are New Zealanders, we are Kiwis, we have this historical context of anti-war and anti-nuclear and so on and so forth. We have discovered that our participation in the Five Eyes has gone beyond our borders. It has the control of that is exerted over our country is beyond our borders, to the extent that it has almost rendered meaningless our national identity because the strings are not being pulled from within our own country. So if our enemies if those who are perpetrating these horrific things around the world, if they are organizing across international borders without respect for the sovereignty of our individual countries, and that is allowing them this globalist control over all of us in our lives, I think that it's pretty abundantly obvious that in order to tackle that, we, the resistance, are going to have to also collaborate across international borders. We need to make this a transnational effort to push back against the Five Eyes, to push back against the systems of control and of oppression that exist around the world. I think in terms of the integrity of the electoral process, so long as the media are the gatekeepers of public opinion, they are the ultimate meddlers in any election. Certainly, that's what I've experienced in New Zealand. The New Zealand media have, this year more than any, I have finally understood the extent to which media actively meddle in electoral outcomes in their own domestic countries. And through the disclosures relating to the CIA dispatch orders to New Zealand spies, I have discovered the extent to which the military-industrial complex has been meddling in even the elections of allies. France is an ally of New Zealand, yet US spies dispatched New Zealand spies to meddle in the French election. So while all we hear from the media is Russia, 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 I think for us, we've had to have a hard look at New Zealand, New Zealand, New Zealand. And for you guys, you might have to have a hard look at Germany, Germany, Germany. Because if New Zealand is being sent to do these types of things on behalf of empire, it's highly likely that Germany is as well. The last thing that I would like to discuss with you is really serious. And that's my personal belief, that we cannot wait until our heroes are dead and gone to defend them. We cannot, in the last couple of months, I've interviewed some pretty amazing people. One of them was David Swanson, the famous anti-war activist from Virginia, and recently Cynthia McKinney. Both of them talked about the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. versus the reality of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. while he was still alive. While he was alive, he was anti-capitalist and anti-war. He was not just merely a civil rights activist. He saw all of the problems of society and how they all fit in together. Yet, as Cynthia McKinney said, posthumously, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy was sanitized. And that has led me to think, what if we lost Julian? What if we have all of this discussion, is Julian good, is Julian bad, is Julian this, is Julian that, is WikiLeaks this, is WikiLeaks that? But has anyone really stopped and thought about, what if we didn't have WikiLeaks? What if we lost WikiLeaks? What if we lost Julian? In what way will his memory be sanitized after his death? In what way will WikiLeaks' legacy be sanitized if they were no longer with us? WikiLeaks is the bulwark that protects all of us as journalists, as activists, and you too as pirates. They have been the cornerstone of the resistance. And I'm not talking about the Mick resistance, the Hillary Clinton resistance, the funded DNC resistance. I'm talking about the resistance that the Clintons and Obama was smashing for years when they were in power. All of us who have been targeted, we have been targeted by the Bush administration, by the Obama administration. We will be targeted by the Trump administration, because no matter which administration is in power, left or right, they will target activists, they will target journalists. So what are we going to do? Are we going to sit and wait for the demise of those few organizations that protect us, that create a space for us to work in, that take the extreme heat that would be straight down upon our heads if we allow them to fall? Or are we going to put our petty social pressures aside and look at the bigger and more important issue? That's what I feel we need to do, and we need to do pretty urgently, because I think if we lost Julian, or if we lost WikiLeaks, that it would no longer be an issue of, oh, did he tweet something stupid on Twitter? It would be an issue of, holy crap, now the system is going to come and systematically dismantle journalism and activism across the board in a way that we have never seen before. And then our arguments over what who said or didn't say, or what who thinks or didn't think, are going to look pretty silly and small-minded. So that's the last thought that I want to leave you guys with today, is I believe that we must stand with WikiLeaks, and we must do so actively. It must involve direct action in a way that we have not yet done while we still have them. Personally, I side with the targets. When someone is a known FBI, NSA, X-Keyscore, CIA target, I stand with the target. I am a target myself, but I stand with the targets. And I think that we need to look seriously at what has been done, the extent of the persecution of those targets, and then reflect back upon the narratives and the social pressures that are floating around to deride those targets, and ask ourselves simply, who benefits? Who benefits from us failing to support the targets? Who benefits if the targets fall? Because these resources that are used to oppress the targets, well, these however many agents that have been tasked with taking down WikiLeaks, they will not be fired if they are successful. they will be turned upon and unleashed upon the rest of the international journalist and activist community. And if the New Zealand government can have its spies sent to France by the CIA, then the electoral process and us political parties like the Pirates and like the internet parties are not impervious to that meddling. We will be subject to those resources. So, like I said before, together we're capable of things that alone we are not. Solidarity is life. Solidarity is life. So that's my wish for the future, is that we define our own successes, we stay true to our own motivations, we act in solidarity with each other, and we take a hard look at what we can do that we're currently not to protect those who are protecting us. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions for me about Internet Party or about 2017, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to engage with you or to answer any questions that you have. If there's any way that Internet Party can help the Pirate Party, please let us know, because we love you guys and we will do everything that we can to help and support you. I'm at Suzie3D on Twitter, SUZI 3D, and I'll catch you later. Have a great conference, you guys.